I'm Erin Moulton. I'm going to try to speak up. Can everybody hear me if I talk like this?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So I wrote a book, Keepers of the Labyrinth, which I'm so glad you could come and hear about. What we're basically going to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about the story behind the story, so some of the mythology and the ideas that it's based on. I get really excited about that part, so I hope it's not boring, because oftentimes I start to see people like glaze over, and I'm like, and then it could be tied to this, and it could be tied to this, and you know, they're just like, whatever, that's cool. But, so yeah, if I start to see you glaze, I'll move on. I'm gonna do a reading after we talk about mythology and the backstory, and then I'll do a quick question and answer. It can be about the story behind the story, it can be about writing in general or publishing. We can just talk shop about that, and then we'll grab some snacks. I have a personality test. So in the book, there are 4 main keepers of the labyrinth. There's the inventor, the artist, the historian, and the protector. So if you take a personality test, what I can do is then put your symbol in your book for you, and give you the description, okay? So that's the plan. I have been under the weather all week. So I'm gonna go slowly, which is good because sometimes people tell me I talk too fast anyway about this stuff, so maybe it'll be the right speed finally. Okay. So Keepers of the Labyrinth is my 4th book. Looks like this. And it kind of showed up in a different way than my other books showed up in my head. So basically what happens, yes, Mrs. Smith?
Thank you. Please tell me who you are and what your position is. I would like to know.
Erin Moulton. And I am the teen librarian at the Derry Public Library, as well as an author. This idea popped up one morning, and basically when I think of an idea, it usually comes in a word or a phrase. It could be a voice or a couple of lines. And I was just sitting, petting the dog one morning, and it's kind of, in my head, it's kind of like a cafe. So it's almost like there's a little buzz all the time, and then you hear fragments of conversation. That's the best way I can describe it. So you're kind of walking through, and it's like, or it'll over here say, sometimes when I'm doing the dishes, I'll hear like, Lord Teaspoon, or one day I was walking down the street, and it was a mutinous foray into the afterlife. I think these are just, you know, story ideas or things that could evolve into a story later. That morning, all it said was the daughters of Ariadne. And I literally like popped up and said, who's Ariadne? So I didn't know why I remembered Ariadne at that one moment in time. I'm sure I heard about her when I was studying Latin in high school, and maybe it just kind of stayed back there in the back of my brain for a while. But that morning, I had that phrase pop into my head, and I thought, okay, first I thought, uh-oh, did I find that on Google, or did I pass it at the library, or did I see a title that, you know, said that? Because I wanted to make sure it was just out of the ether. So I went looking, and funny enough, Ariadne is the mistress of the labyrinth, right? And so I kind of had to hunt her down and then hunt down the story. So what I'm about to walk you through is the process of me hunting down the story, and I hope it's not completely confusing, because what starts to happen is just connections, and I hope I can explain it okay. So, first person I found was Ariadne. Does anybody know a little bit about mythology here? A little bit? You have a little basis? Does anybody remember who Ariadne is, besides the mistress of the labyrinth? Okay. Well, I think the thread and the web have something to do. So but Ariadne is the mistress of the labyrinth, and then she's also the daughter of Minos and the sister to the Minotaur. And she's known for giving the thread to Theseus when he's going to kill the Minotaur in the labyrinth, right?
So she's going to kill their brother?
Right. Good, Kendra. That's what I was thinking too. And she lived on Crete, so that's where the labyrinth is. So I found, okay, Ariadne. And the thing about mythology, of course, is that there are many different versions of the myths. So the ones that I focused on were my favorite mythographer and Apollodorus, which people don't talk about quite as much. So then we have the Minotaur. I love this little baby picture of the Minotaur on this vase from 340 BC, because he's so cute in the little picture, isn't he? Just a little baby. And I don't think anybody remembers him like that. So the Minotaur, everybody knows the Minotaur. Minotaur is the half bull, half man. He's got that head of a bull. He's the son of Pasiphae, and he's imprisoned in the middle of the labyrinth. He kills tribute sent from Athens. He's slain by Theseus. He's betrayed by his sister Ariadne, as Kendra pointed out. Why would she do that? That's a good question. I don't think we ever find out. And he lived in the labyrinth in Crete. We also have Daedalus, who I love. Daedalus is like one of my favorite figures in all of mythology. He's a great inventor. He's the builder of the labyrinth that imprisons the Minotaur. He also builds the wings. You know that picture where they're flying toward the sun and he and Icarus are going too close to the sun?
Yeah.
And then Icarus, his wings melt and they fall. And it's so sad. And the thing about Daedalus is that, I'm going to talk about Daedalus for just a minute. Everything he creates leads to destruction, right? Or something bad. So he has to build this labyrinth, which is prison. And then he uses creation to escape the island by creating wings, and it kills his son. So he's tragic from beginning to end. And of course, he's imprisoned by Minos on Crete. So do you see where all these people are ending up here? All these great mythological characters are all in this one place. Does anybody remember Europa? Okay, one person's like, yes, I remember, sort of. Okay, Europa gets abducted from her homeland by Zeus, who is pretending to be a bull. He's like in the form of a bull. And she falls in love with this bull. and gets on his back and they ride across the sea to Crete. She has 3 children. And she's married, maybe, like some of the versions say, she marries a king named Asterion, which is interesting because that's another name for the Minotaur. So she's, again, ending up on Crete. And then there's Zeus. We all know Zeus. Who's Zeus?
He's the king of lightning.
Right, god of thunder, king of lightning. So here's the thing. Some of his myths are really cool, though. I mean, he's a horrible person, but the myths are cool. So he's born on Crete, and what happens with him is his father Cronus has eaten all the other children. And his mom says, no, that's not going to happen to Zeus. So she takes him to a cave and hides him. And they crash branches together to sound like thunder to hide his cries. So Cronus can't hear him and come after him. So, interesting. So he's born, even though he's a god, and he's on Crete. And he's hidden in the cave. And he's the god of thunder. We know that. Okay, so here's where my brain started to go. I had centered in on this lovely place. I was like, okay, I know these myths where Ariadne once lived, all center on this island off of Crete. What's the deal with Crete? What else happened in Crete? Why is it the center of my focus while I'm thinking about this story? Does anybody know who lived on Crete? When you're not thinking about myths, does anybody know anything about Crete? Liz?
Minoans.
Yeah, the Minoans. So there's this, well, actually, first let me show you this. This is my book stack. So I did some research, and in here you'll see there's some books that are pure mythology, and then there's some books that are archaeology. So here's the Bronze Age Aegean, and here's a book on the Minoans, and this is Apollodorus. I wish I'd thought to bring that, because it's really cool, because half of it's written in English and half of it is written in Greek on alternating pages, which is kind of neat to look at. But I just started, plowing forward, and a lot of when I'm hunting down a story, it's literally that. I might go in a bunch of different directions, but I'm trying to figure out what it's all about. And I love that part of the process, so it really fuels me. I know you do Ancestry, it's kind of like that. You're digging, you're trying to figure out the puzzle. So I went hunting for the story. And I found, well, actually what I did, I found the Minoans, as Liz was saying. This is a civilization that lived on Crete from 2000 BC to 1500 BC. And before or after, they haven't got the timeline exactly right because it's so far back and you're like dating pieces of pottery. But what I do, I have a bad habit. When I am doing research and I really want an expert and I can't find a lot of great books on them, so I went looking for the Minoans in our collection and in a lot of other collections around. And at the public library level, I found a lot of books that were from the 60s, and they didn't seem like they were very up to date, especially since archaeology is ever evolving. So I emailed a professor at Boston University, and I said, could you point me to some good resources that you would use for your class? Because he, teaches the Bronze Age Aegean. And so I said, just so I can learn a little bit about the Minoans. And I'm trying to dig this story up. And he was really nice, because I literally said, I'm just on a hunt to figure out what's going on. And he gave me some great titles. He gave me the Bronze Age Aegean. And we talked about Atlantis. Some places, or some people have believed that Crete was Atlantis. And he said, that's garbage. Don't follow that route. And so I said, okay, I won't. I'll do something else. So I found out some wonderful things about the Minoans, and I was totally sucked into their history. So a couple of things is that their buildings, they have these, they've now dug up enough where they can see the floor plans, right, and the ruins. And they're labyrinthian. So they look a lot like this. And one thing, they believe this is a Minoan labrys. It's called a labrys. It's a double-headed axe. Often female deities are seen with it. And that could have been used to guide people in, it's not a palace as in kings and queens, because that's not how the Minoans were as far as they could tell. But if you were in a Minoan building like that, a labrys would be on the wall to show you how to get back to the main corridors, so you could find your way out. So that's interesting. I thought, okay, well that's kind of cool. Another thing about them is that they had a lot of bull art. So they did a bull leaping ritual. You can see on their fresco there. The women are white. They're painted in white. And the man is jumping like a gymnast over the back of the bull. And this was supposedly depicting one of their rituals. And so you also see they cast like the head in bronze. And they also, in the Minoans, the book called The Minoans by Leslie Fitton, she said they used to worship the bull, and every time they had an earthquake, it was like the horns were being shook in the earth, right? So if a bull was, angry down there, it would shake the island. So we know a lot that the Minoans are connected to the bull. Interesting, right? Okay, we have the Minotaur, we have Zeus dressing up like a bull. I'm just saying, starting to connect their very keen interest on the bull. There's also this, which is my favorite part. So, the Minoan script that they used is called Linear A. Linear B has been deciphered. That's the one that is right before, like you have Linear A, Linear B, and then Greek. Okay? So Linear B has been deciphered. They can read it. The Linear A has never been deciphered. So literally they dig up a tablet, a Linear A tablet, which is the language of the Minoans. They have no idea what it says. So if they got a big hall, I asked the professor at Boston University, he said if we had a big hall and one that had Linear A and B on it, we could figure it out, because basically what it would be it would serve as a Rosetta Stone, okay? But they haven't excavated enough to do that. So you're talking about a civilization that died off, that has a written history that you don't know what it is. So that's cool. Of course, Professor Runnels is like, it's going to tell you there's 5 urns of oil, there's this much wheat. Not going to tell you a story of mythology, but I'm a fiction writer, so I said, I'm making stuff up. And that's exactly what I did. So what's also cool, though, is there are other mysteries that tie archaeology and mythology together, okay? Are you still following me? Is anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Everyone believed that Troy was a fabled city. So if you read the Iliad and you hear about Troy, right? They all thought, oh, that's folklore, that's mythology. Until a man named Heinrich Schliemann was like, no, this has to be real, and he went excavating, and he found Troy. So that makes you think, well, what else could possibly be real in mythology? Right. Myths were handed down orally until the classical Greeks. So what if it's like a game of telephone gone terribly wrong? Like, what if someone's like, oh, this guy, this warlord was so big and massive, and then later on, this god of thunder. You know, stories going through a town get, I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that, stories even going through a town get elaborated a little bit sometimes. What if it had years and years and years and years and years and years and years to change? How would it change? And then, of course, the Minoans, linear A, we don't know what they say. It really would probably just be records of their but it's fiction. So I can play around with that. What if it did give you a story about some of the myths we hear? So that's where I was when I started to think about a story. It was all what if. What if other Greek stories lead back to a varied history? What if we did decipher linear A? What stories would they tell us? What if the myths became a game of telephone gone wrong? What if Daedalus, Europa, Ariadne, Minotaur, and Zeus were not myths? What if they were Minoans? So that's a seed. It took me so long to narrow down to that as I was hunting down the story, but that's where I ended up. So what if they were Minoan? How did their stories get so warped? Yes, Kendra?
Maybe it's because maybe travelers came to their island and they told them the story and they didn't understand them correctly.
Possibly. So the other cool thing that Kendra's reminding me of is the Minoans died out, essentially. So they lived on the island for that period of time. And then there's different stories about how. And the archaeologists don't exactly know how they died out, but there are some theories. So one is that Santorini, which was then known as Thera, has a volcano. And it erupted. And it was massive. And a tsunami flooded the island. And then, volcanic ash came down on it. So some things lean to that. It's funny in archaeology because people say, that's what it was. One archaeologist is like, I found proof, and then another is like, bah, no, that's crazy. That's not actual science. So they're still digging around. The other thought, or it might be a combination, is that the Mycenaeans came in and they kind of wiped them out. And then they became Mycenaeans and then Greek. So. Yes.
I think there was a big
What?
volcano and the ash came down.
Just like
Then
Pompeii?
the Mycenaeans came and took them over because they were weak.
I think so. So that's like a combination. So Liz is saying maybe it was both. Maybe it was the volcano weakened their civilization. Then they were like, this is a perfect time to intrude because this is this perfect spot in the Aegean. We can have ships leaving from everywhere, going everywhere, conquering everything. So that is another possibility. I played around with that moment in their history, in the story, but you can only play around with it. And I can because I'm a fiction writer. I'm sure Professor Runnels would be like, oh God, I shouldn't have helped you. What did you do? I did thank him in the back of the book, but I warned him I was going to. And I said, this is high fiction, and it's a present day story that has an ancient history. So I drew it way to today and the backstory is what they're trying to dig up as they go through this. So I'm going to read a little bit about, I'm just going to jump in. If I can find my glasses. Yes. This is what you need to know now that I gave you the brain dump about where the story came from. The story begins in present day. We meet Lilith Bennett, whose mom has maybe committed suicide. She doesn't believe it though, because her mother's motto was "Men zeus aplos zeus tomera," which means don't just live boldly. So, the Greek professor I emailed gave me that line. She wants to find out about her mom, and the one way she's going to do that is by attending a future leaders conference that her mother had attended when she was her age. And she had that she knows that there's this one woman named Bente Formo who is at this conference, and she's still a counselor there, and she wants to ask Bente about her mom and her history. So she goes to this conference, Future Leaders Conference, based on Crete, at this beautiful place called Melnius Manor. And it's gorgeous, and it's eco-friendly, and it leans into the side of the mountain. So it's just in the side of the mountain, so you see the face of it. Who knows what's in the mountain? I'm sure you can't guess. So what happens is she arrives in Crete. She is in Hall C with a couple of friends. Their names are Kat and Charlie and Sydney. And they're all very different. And they have to do challenges. It's like team building exercises with the other teams. And they find out they're kind of like the outcasts. They're not quite as rich or fancy or pedigreed as anybody else. And what happens is I'm gonna read you a little snippet as to when they have kind of accidentally gone through, the place has been taken over and they've accidentally gone through this door to get away from these people who've taken over the manor. And they're running from them, and they come to an entrance to a very scary place. So, do you hear that? Sydney asked, inching toward the pile of rocks on one end. Lil couldn't hear anything over her breathing. It's rain, Sydney said. She stepped onto the pile of rocks. Lil heard it now, too. There was a sliver of diffused light shining in the crevices between rocks and the enormous pile. There was a smell of mountain soil. Lil reached toward the torch up to light Sydney's way as she climbed. A ribbon of fog had found its way to them. Yes, Kat said, readjusting her party wrap, which had loosened and come untied during the fall. She joined Sydney on the hill of rock. We just need to move all of these. Charlie reached up, dislodging a small fist-sized rock from the space. A few others skittered downward. Lil heard a shuffle from outside, and then the boulder jammed against the stick. There were only 2 attackers, and it had taken all 4 girls to move that boulder, plus Sydney had wedged it in place with the stick. Lil was pretty sure it would hold, but she moved back to the entrance just in case. The 2 seemed determined, and though Lil had only seen them for a moment before, they were bigger and older. I'll guard the door, Lil whispered, hoping she could at least keep an eye on the branch while the others moved the rocks. Her torchlight stretched to the other side of the small chamber as she made her way to the boulder, and Lil caught her breath. She squinted. Had she seen it right? She lifted her torch and stepped forward. Bente's words from that morning on the mountaintop echoed in her ears. The Labrynth was her directional tool. The wall would be marked with it to indicate a correctional path to the main quarters, a guide, a compass, a clue, if you will. There, in the center of what she now saw was an old stone door, was a double-headed axe, a Labrynth. Lil moved to it as if pulled by an invisible thread. The marking was indented, a perfect sphere. She looked down at the disc that hung around her neck, a perfect fit. A long, smooth, rectangular slab next to the door caught her attention. She reached out and brushed her hand across its surface. Dust filtered from beneath her fingertips, unveiling a large plaque, the top etched with symbols. Most of them were new to her, but some of them looked familiar. In the very top line was a skull, and next to it a few squiggly lines side by side. She aimed the disc to eye level, looking from one to the other. Many of the symbols were the same. What did they mean? She glanced back at the plaque, wiping her hand downward, shuttling more dirt to the ground. There was another script, something that ran in lines like tally marks. Next was Greek, next perhaps Italian. And at the very bottom she found words she recognized. She knelt down in front of it, pulling the torchlight to her. Her breath loosened, the remaining dust from the crevices, as she reached the familiar English. Those who seek knowledge knock at the door that lies herein, but only ones with fierceness will find a common kin. Beware folly and weak footfall. Beware your mortal sins. A simple word of advice. Before you do begin, everything you think you know abandons you within. And if you do not let it, then you will find your end. Lil squinted at the final line. It was written in Greek, but she could read it. It was the one phrase she could recognize. She twisted the torchlight lower, her breath catching in her throat. Min Zeus Aplos, Zeus Tomara. She could hear her mother's voice echoing through the chamber, saying the phrase over and over again, first in Greek, then in English. Her mind spun. There it was on the playground, before a test, at a soccer game. When Lil was afraid to try the ropes course for the first time, do not just live, live boldly. The phrase was the embodiment of strength, the the embodiment of her mother. Lil's throat tightened, and she backed into the wall behind her. Why would her mother's favorite expression be here? Why would Bente bring her the disc? Had her mother been beyond this door? Were there answers in there about how a woman who lived her life so boldly could give up, could end it? Lil spun around with the torch in her hand. I have to go this way, she said, sparks flicking down around her as she waved toward the group. I think we can clear this, Charlie said. We should be able to climb out once we figure out how to move the bigger boulders. No, Lil said, shaking her head. I'm not. I can't go that way. Kat and Charlie stared at each other, looking confused. Sydney dropped the rock she was holding and hurried toward Lil. Lil swallowed hard. She gestured toward the indentation, the symbol. I have to figure out what this means. Charlie's eyes went big as she saw the indentation and inscription. Didn't Bente say it was a guide? Kat said in a hushed voice. Lil nodded. A crash came from the opposite side of the door and a gruff voice followed. Shoot it, Felice. Shatter the rock. It's a bit narrow if it ricochets, a voice replied. Lil's heart kicked. Whatever they were going to do, they had to do it quickly. Well? Sydney shook her head. No, this is irrational. We need to keep dismantling that pile. We need to go and get the police. We don't even know if we'll be able to move those stones. They're huge, Lil said. She held up the disc. And I have to know what this means, where it goes. Lil pictured Bente dying to protect it. Had her mother died to protect it too? I just think it might be a clue, she said, to my mom, to what happened. There's got to be another way for you to figure this out, Sydney hissed. Lil saw Charlie's eyes land on the disc and flicked to the wall. You have to admit that it appears to be an artifact with an interesting history, she whispered, one longing to be discovered. Listen, Lil said, stepping away from the others and pulling the disc from her neck. You three can work on that pile, figure out how to move the rocks. Tell Athenia, call the police. Let them know someone's in here and that we've trapped the people who killed Bente behind a boulder. I need to do this. I need to know. Kat shook her head, a long dark curl coming loose from her ear. We stick together. It's safer. Charlie nodded. We're a team, she said. Lil took a breath. You don't have to. We have no idea what's in there. She knew she had to do this, but she didn't want to endanger everyone else. She was used to going it alone. She could handle it. The boulder barricading them in shifted and groaned, but stayed in place. I highly object to this, Sydney said. She cast her eyes toward the stones as if calculating their size, then peered at the labrys on the wall, then back at the stones. We have no idea. There's no way of... She let out a breath as the branch jolted and shuddered with the compressed weight of another push on the exterior. Fine, she said. Lil looked at all three girls. They met her gaze. You really don't have to, she said as she lined up the labrys on the disc with the labrys in the door. I'm sure, Charlie said, and Kat answered at the same time. I said fine, didn't I? Sydney said, pushing her glasses up on her nose. And here we go. Lil pressed the disc into place. The door swung noiselessly, craning open like a mouth filled with rotted moths. A breeze blew toward them, old, soft, and decomposing. And Lil looked in. The passage was dark, shadowed, and littered with stones. And though she knew her eyes were playing tricks on her, she could swear she saw the flash of the soles of her mother's feet flicking off into the distance. Her black hair swirled, disappearing down the passage, ahead and away from her, always. Even if there was just a chance of finding out more, somewhere in the shadows, she had to try. Lil retrieved the disc from the door, took a breath, and stepped inside. Okay. So, there's a little setup before that. But that's kind of the entry into the labyrinth, and you get to know the girls and everything. And yeah, so any questions about the story or the backstory or writing? Yes, Elizabeth?
Yeah, Erin, how do you decide who's going to be in your story, and do they ever surprise you?
I don't really decide.
They just
Yeah,
appear?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I get to mold them after a while, but, and in this one it took me a while to figure out which one was going to play the hero, because I wanted her to be athletic, but I kept kind of waffling, because I'm not very athletic, and I tend to lean on my comfort, so I was like, well, this historian, she knows everything, like the one who, the bookish person, has a lot of answers. But I think I ended up balancing them pretty well, where the inventor, the protector, the artist, historian, the one that, like, they each kind of have leanings on those symbols and those personalities. They each play a pretty big role in solving the riddles and clues as they go. So, yeah, they don't really, I don't just say, okay, you're gonna be in a story. It's more like a total immersion, like you're watching a movie and all of a sudden that's what's happening. You're going in and you're just typing along with it. So, yes, Kendra?
So Lilith is the
Yes.
What
Yes.
Yeah, here, what was the question?
Oh, the
here?
question was, is Lilith the protector? So yes, Lilith is the protector, yes.
How many times did you rewrite, or how many drafts did you do?
I rewrote, it's 7?
Okay.
I think 7 at least. The first one I wrote was so bad, I apologize profusely to my editor, because I was like, this is all new to me. Usually I write middle grade, and usually it's first person present tense. So it's like this one kid is talking in your head, and this was omniscient because it served the story better. And it was the first young adult novel. And though there's adventure in Flutter, it was my first real foray into more adventure with more complexity. So I just apologized. I was like, this is probably a mess. I don't think you're, and she just called me. She didn't even write me an editorial letter like they usually do. She picked up the phone and was like, let's talk through this. I'm like, oh, that was really worse than I thought. And she was like, I kept putting in middle grade type things. If you read a lot of middle grade, you know there's a lot of quirky characters. I think I still have quirky characters, but I literally had a shepherd walking around with a little goat. That was like his sidekick, and he was an apothecary. It was just weird, and it didn't work for this book, although I'm saving him for another one. I had an old woman who worked on classic cars, and like, she was ridiculous. I'm pulling her into another one as well. Although I think Trudy still has a little of her personality. So, yeah, it took me about 7, and that's probably once it was a solid first draft. Yes.
Now, is this a standalone book, or will there be like?
If it sells well, it will be first in probably a trilogy. I definitely left it at a cliffhanger, but that's the tricky part of the business. Because I'm like, I'm ready to dive back in where I left those characters, and they're like, well, if it sells, well, we'll see how the sales go. Okay. I'll just wait on that then. I didn't, I started it, but.
Did you travel to do research?
Yes, so I did put, I could go on and on about Greece and the history. I did put some pictures up there. I went to Crete in 2013. Can you still see me, Michael? Sorry, I'm moving. I'm moving from my spot. 2013, I went to Crete. There's some pictures over there just to show the landscape. And there was a place we went called Million Mountain Retreat, and it was like you're standing there, and the wind is blowing so hard, and the rocks are all around you, and the rugged terrain is amazing, and it feels like your heart opens. It's weird, for me it did. But maybe I was just like, I'm traveling, new perspective. But for me it was just like, whoa. And also we'd hiked Samaria Gorge that same day, so I was very exhausted, and we got there, and this place, they like raise animals to eat, and they garden to eat. Like, it's self-sustaining, right? It's just on this mountain, and it was a harrowing trip up. I remember talking to the guy on email, and I said, oh, tall winding road, no problem. I'm from a mountain in Vermont. Then we're driving on it, and we're like, this is scary. Because in Crete, there's no guardrail, and you're going up this turnstile higher and higher, and if you die. And that's why they have all those they had these little churches they're like this big, and they're just on the side of the road. And I thought it was a Greek Orthodox thing, because I didn't know anything about the Greek Orthodox. And Kostas, one of our hosts, said, no, that's just where people die. People die every 3 days in a car wreck.
Oh.
It's very bad. They drive very fast. They drive on. It's very dangerous. And in Reiki season, he said especially, because they're making the Reiki and they're drinking it, and then they're driving home. It's terrible. So we went all the way up, and it's the wind, and then a thunderstorm happened. And so if you've ever been in Crete or seen probably a Greek movie, you know they're like in the stone houses, right? And the shutters are popping against the walls. So it's this like orchestra. is happening. And it was amazing. So we ate a bunch of food when we got there, and it was amazing. And it was just the most beautiful place. So that inspired me for Melios Manor and the food. I tried to weave in the setting and the food, and so good. So. But yeah, the whole place was cool. We also went and saw ruins, lots of ruins of the Minoans. My brother-in-law, we went to see a ruin, and it was like closed off by a fence, and there was the biggest donkey I've ever seen out there. And he like had to get a picture for me because I wanted to get this one picture, but it was closed. So he was like in there with this biggest donkey I've ever seen. I thought I was gonna be mad at him. It wasn't. He got a picture. I'm like, friend. But apparently it was fine. So yeah, any others? Yes.
How long did the entire writing process take?
It was too fast for me this time. Usually, so the first book I ever wrote, I had a long time because I hadn't sent it to a publisher. Then when you find a publisher, they give you a deadline, this thing called a deadline. And I didn't hit any of them. Like every time a deadline came, it was like, this is really not ready yet, it's not good. So probably 6 months. So, very fast for me. I would probably, to have more relaxed time next time, press for a little more time at the beginning of the story. But now that I also know the setting and everything, I feel like I'd jump in a little bit quicker too.
Do you have any special technique to settle yourself into writing when you're at home working on this?
Yeah, every book has a different soundtrack for me. I have these big noise canceling headphones I like to listen to. Even if no one's around, I just like it to be in my head. So Hans Zimmer was in my head. He's the one who did like Pirates. Every great movie that's like really got a great soundtrack, I think. Pirates of the Caribbean, the Batman trilogy, Dark Knight trilogy. Last of the Mohicans kept coming up, and it was really working for me, just for what I was working on. I don't know if it was just running in the mountains or something. So I always have a different soundtrack, and tea, Barry's Gold Blend specifically, and it's an English breakfast tea, made in Ireland. It's an Irish breakfast tea, really. It's from Cork. And that's pretty much it. I have a standing desk, but I actually pull up a stool. I was like, this standing desk would be great for me, and then I put a stool in. So I stand and I sit, and I stand and I sit. I also like to write and like plaster my walls. It looks like some sort of psychopath. With big Post-it notes that have notes all over them, and sometimes they're in front of the window, because the corner where my desk is like, it's got a window, and then there's a little bookshelf. There's not a lot of room to put things on the wall, so I'm like closing the window off. I'm sure the neighbors are like, what is she doing? But I like visuals, and I like to storyboard as well. So some people, when they're doing an outline, will type it all out, and I like to, even though my drawing is terrible, I will storyboard it out with stick figures. And if anybody's interested in the craft of writing, structuring it can be hard. I originally, for this one, I followed a little Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, which is a good craft book, but it's screenwriting based instead of novel based. So you kind of have to say, okay, he's saying page 50 of a script is where this moment happens. And you have to translate it to, if it was a novel, where's Act 1, 2, and 3 going, and what does that look like? So, yes?
You had mentioned that you were thinking a possible trilogy. How do you know where, like how much to divulge in book 1, and have you thought
Yes.
through the end of book 3?
Right. Yes. I thought all the way through it. And I feel like I just barely opened the door. So I don't really know exactly how you do that. For a trilogy, I feel like you have to have, the small micro things that are the conflict, and then there's always that greater evil still lurking, because that's what carries you through to the finale, right? So, that's one person that I had still out there, even though my main guys may or may not survive the tale. But besides that, I think it's hard to tell because also, regardless of what trilogy or series you're looking at, sometimes the books just get bigger and bigger. And so I think a lot of it does also depend on audience response. Because, you know, even right away I can say, okay, I didn't tell enough about that, and I did tell, I know what's going on here, but maybe I didn't tell enough about that for the audience. A little bit. Some people love it when there's a little mystery. It's very interesting to see the mixed, you know, mixed reviews come in. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is slim for a first novel, for a trilogy, I think. Yes.
What if the series becomes as big as the Warrior series?
What is your question?
She said, what if the series becomes as big as the Warrior series? I doubt it will.
But what if it does?
That would be great, but also crushing. The thing about my favorite thing is writing. My least favorite thing is criticism. I mean, not from my editor. I love criticism from my editor because I like that. But everybody, you can never please everybody. I want to please everybody, and you can't. So that's where, I guess that's my problem. So if I put a book out there, I hear people who love it. I hear people are like, it's okay, I don't know, whatever. I hate that, because I'm like, I spent this time on it. How could you say that? They have every right to dislike it. Totally fine. But I think that would be hard for me. I'm just going to stop looking at reviews, but I'm also a little obsessive. So it's hard for me not to look at the reviews, even though I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that. Inside, I'm like, I gotta go look at that review. I gotta find out if I like that. Yes?
Does the fact that your protagonist's name is Lilith have any either meaning?
Maybe. Well, Lilith, I wanted her to be undaunted and strong and very empowered. So I think that's a very fitting name for her lore. Yes?
What do you like to read and watch, you know, when you're not writing, but, you know, has had an impact, and, you know,
Yeah.
you have interest in?
I actually really like nonfiction. So I read a lot of nonfiction. One I'm reading right now is about Chris McDougall's new book. Has anybody heard of that one? He wrote the Natural Born Heroes is the one I'm reading now. His first one about the runners. Anybody know?
The Battle of
No.
I'm sure it's a liar.
No, Chris McDougall, it's about like ultra marathoners today.
Oh, yeah.
You know the one? It's, what? No, not sure. I haven't read that. I guess I should. Two people are saying it. I'll think of it. But Natural Born Heroes, it's about Crete, and it's about the Cretan resistance in World War II, and how this shepherd would basically just run across the island overnight. And so it looks at this extreme athleticism with like zero diet. He'd eat like a scrap of bread and then just go running across the mountain. And he talks about like goat logic, which is how goats travel. And so the shepherds make their way. And it's kind of like parkour. And some of that will play into my next book. If you know anything about parkour. That's where they run across the tops of buildings. It all ties together. So the old stuff, the ancient stuff, ties to like a more modern. You'll have to practice if I can make it work. So, any guess?
If you had to
Are we going on? Going on time? Yes.
pick a couple of books that kind of, like if someone's like, oh, what is it about, or was it like, and you had to pick like 3 books to kind of guide them on like.
What
the
these?
feel of
This
the
is
book?
like? Yes.
Yeah, what would you
So
choose?
people describe it best as, well, one reviewer in Voya said it's like Dan Brown, but with mythology. So it leans on those realistic puzzles. Another said it's like Girl Goonies meets mythology. So you like the Goonies, that kind of friendship, and they go on the other adventures. And then some say a little bit of Indiana Jones meets Percy Jackson. So you have mythology plus it's more realistic with those ancient mechanisms. You know how Indiana Jones is always running from like boulder that's rolling down at him.
Is it like Nicholas Flamel?
Not, it's been a really long time since I've read that.
Is
It's
the
more
metaphor and
fantasy.
stuff?
Nicholas Flamel's more fantasy,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
This leans a little more towards sci-fi
Okay.
in my head. People just describe it as adventure, but I'm looking at the full arc of the trilogy. And this is the setup. Yes?
Sorry, it seems like you did a lot of research in the mythology and having, interest in that. Did you find that there were, as you're reading, as you're writing it, that you had to like kind of make up your own things to fill in the
Yes.
holes? or-
So what you'll find is, thank you for asking that, especially where the female characters are involved in mythology. They're mostly getting dragged about or slapped about. And one of my main motives, especially about creating the 4 female protagonists for this, is to have an empowered relationship to myths, okay? And so I found that Ariadne and Europa's story, you don't get anything. So Ariadne, she's the mistress of the Labyrinth. You see her give the thread to Theseus, that's it. Like, she then gets taken by Theseus because she's in love with him, because she saw him at the entrance of the labyrinth, to Naxos where he abandons her. And then she falls in love with baby Dionysus, and then we don't really know. And then Europa's even a little bit less. We don't really know about Europa. So with both of those, I kind of twisted their stories around a little bit. I was like, okay, if Ariadne is the mistress of the labyrinth, and the Labrys is directional in the labyrinth, does she have a thread, or does she have a battle axe? What
Maybe
does
it's
what is she?
Babylon's threat.
Maybe. Or is the thread metaphorical? Don't know. So I did a lot of playing around with it. But also you will find with Daedalus and Minotaur, I twisted their stories as well, especially the Minotaur, because I think he's just misunderstood. Did you see his baby picture? Guys, come on. He's adorable. So, yes. And if they're Minoans, is he really a monster? I don't know. Yes, Elizabeth?
Okay, I give up. What does that mean?
What?
What if the myths become a game of telephone?
Oh, okay. Telephone. You know when the kids have a,
But it's called Chinese whispers.
okay, Chinese whispers?
I say something to
If-
you, you say it to your sister, it's no longer the same thing.
So
She
if-
says it
right,
to
if
this
I
one,
say
it's
to
changed a
Kendra,
little bit. She
Oh,
says
is
Let's
it
go to the
changes?
store.
it changes a
Right.
little bit.
Okay.
So is that what
Right,
happened with
right.
the myths?
Until all the way to the
Yeah.
end person has to say,
Yeah.
they have to say what the line was,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's usually complete gibberish.
Right, right.
There was a very famous one with World War I. Send reinforcements, I'm going to advance.
Right.
It goes like that.
Yeah.
And she said, send reinforcements, I'm going to advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, see, that's gone wrong. So,
Okay.
any others? Yes?
This is just personal, but when did you decide you wanted to write? When did you start writing? Or have you always journaled or something?
Yeah, I did always journal, but I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. And even in my journal, I was like, I'm gonna be a writer someday. And then I went to theater school. So, I don't know why I did that. I thought I really enjoyed theater actually, and I worked backstage when I was a kid. And theater is all about story and storytelling, so I think I really clicked with theater. But then I went to Emerson College for theater studies to do lighting design. And then I tried to do theater lighting design as a living, which does not work well, theater jobs in general. You have to work really hard, and you also have to do corporate stuff. So you have to do events and gigs, and they're usually like overnight. So it was very exhausting. And I thought, when I was at Emerson, I took a fiction class right before I graduated. I had a free class. So I was like, okay, I'll take fiction. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh boy, this is a bummer. I just finished up my bachelor's degree and realized I should not have done that. So I immediately applied to Vermont College of Fine Arts. It was actually a panic move. It was like, I can't face reality and I need to follow this a little bit. And it was the best move I ever could have made because I learned how to write at Vermont College of Fine Arts. So. I also had teachers who were really encouraging of my writing. When I was in second grade, my teacher, Mrs. Hartshorn, I remember her making a bound book with me, like she did the the full cover, and we put the author's note in the back. And Mr. Alligator was my 6th grade teacher, and he was very encouraging, and I was never great at punctuation. And I remember focusing on it really hard for a little while, and in the progress report, I remember him saying, I'd like Erin to stop focusing on the punctuation because her story is suffering. And so I know she'll learn that as we go, but I'd like her to try and focus on the story a little bit more. And I'm so glad he did that, because I could have started on that train where I was saying I'm a bad writer because I can't get these little rules, when I should have been saying, I can learn that, it's about the story. So he was one of my best
Or
teachers.
even if you didn't learn it, you could have an editor.
I still, people are like, Erin, can you look back at your website? Luke, my coworker's like, you need to fix the grammar on the front page of your website. I think some of it is flexible. Two, depending on your voice. So they'll often, the copy editor will say step for voice, and you can say step, which just means leave. So if a character or the narrator sounds a certain way, yes, some of their rules will slide for them. And my voice is choppy because it's breathless and some scene. It's supposed to be. Yes?
Have you done the testing before you?
I did the test. I was a historian. I actually tried to get the protector. I made the test, so like I knew the answers, but I was just like, nah, I still feel really strongly about this one. So every time I got the story. Yes?
Do you have any advice for someone that might be trying to become a writer professionally?
Yes. Everybody says read books. I'm not going to tell you that. You should read tons of books, because then you know what's out there. But I think one of the things that is often overlooked is your personal perspective and the way you observe the work. So I think for any young writer, it's good to kind of often stand back and like take times to observe, and then also make notes of observation. Don't be like Harriet the Spy, where you're like, oh, my friends are idiots. If they catch your journal. I mean, if that's one you want to write, keep it at home, you know, under the bed or something where no one to find. But your personal perspective will come out in your voice, in your narration, and in your story. And that's what makes you original, so I think that's something that's really important. And obviously read and practice it, and have peer critiquers, but that stuff you know. But observation is, and your own unique perspective is key. Because there's so much out there, and everybody can write a formula, like you want to write something original. Thank you.
Thank you.
So guys, there's personality tests in the back, in the very back, if you want to take one of those. And I will give you your sticker of who you are and your description. And oh, if you did buy a book already, and I know the one that belongs to this gift basket has gone, it would be in the front under the flap of the, it's right here, there's a sticker right here if you want the gift basket, okay? If you find an embossing on one of your, Kendra has it here. So you have this, I'm going to assign these to anybody on.
Thank you.
I do have like others, it's called Secret Swag. So if you find an embossing on one of the pages as you're reading with an inventor symbol on it, you can email me and I'll send you some keychains or necklaces or other whatever I feel like, because I just kind of create it as I go. And so it all ties into the symbols. Okay? Yes?
Do you have a secret swag on the sale?
I hadn't thought of this. Maybe. It's not like nice enough to sell, I don't think. So I just kind of throw it together when I feel like it. But maybe. I'm sure I could find you something. All right, thank you guys so much. Eat some food. There's cheese pita, baklava, and I think they're Greek drop cookies. The baklava has nuts. The Greek cookies do not. Okay? Just in case you're allergic to walnuts. Thank you.